head of the British Eugenic Society, which is part of the same, group, more or less. Julian Huxley, he became Director General of UNESCO after World War II. And in laying out his vision for UNESCO, which again is part of the UN, Julian Huxley said, we have to make the unthinkable thinkable again, talking directly about eugenics.
Wow.
And about roughly a decade later, he Julian Huxley coins the term transhumanism, and basically says this is the new eugenics, that it's not about race science so much anymore. It's about using technology and genetic engineering to basically enact eugenics, and this includes like the merging of human and machine.
Most people hear the word transhumanism and think it means progress, better medicine, better bodies, better technology, a future where humans merge with machines and overcome natural limits. But Whitney Webb is pointing to a much darker origin story. She is saying, this movement did not emerge from nowhere. It grew out of the same elite circles that once promoted eugenics, population control, and top-down social engineering. And here's the thing. The most disturbing part is not that powerful people talk about merging humans with technology. The disturbing part is who that future is actually designed for. Because if the elite vision of transhumanism is not meant to liberate ordinary people, but to create a permanent biological and technological hierarchy, then this is not just about innovation. It is about control over what human beings are allowed to become. Whitney Webb begins this section by tracing the World Economic Forum back to figures and institutions most people never associate with Davos. The public image of the WEF is polished and corporate. Global leaders, CEOs, climate panels, technology summits, and carefully scripted language about the future. But Webb's framing pulls the viewer behind that branding and into the ideological roots of the organization itself.
Obtain an atomic bomb also. Later on, Schwab, with the involvement of Kissinger and some other people, including the alleged inspiration for Dr. Strangelove, Herman Kahn, go on to create the World Economic Forum, which quickly gets involved with a group called the Club of Rome, which is very interested in it promoted heavily their initial paper, which I think was 71, 72, called The Limits to Growth, which is all about this idea of overpopulation and sort of the basis for the modern environmental movement.
That matters because institutions do not appear out of thin air. They are built by people with worldviews, networks, and long-term ambitions. When Webb places Schwab, Kissinger, and Herman Kahn inside the origin story, she is not just giving a historical footnote. She is showing that the WEF was born inside a particular elite ecosystem, one deeply interested in strategic planning, global governance, population questions, and managing the future from the top down.
And an alleged co-founder of the World Economic Forum, according to Klaus Schwab, was a man named Maurice Strong, who is credited as sort of the father of modern day climate change science, or rather, I would say climate change alarmism, and is a big promoter of, the same depopulation type of narrative.
This is where the story shifts from global conferences to population management. The language may have changed over time, but the underlying pattern remains familiar. Elites defining humanity as a problem to be managed, measured, and reorganized. In the universal Leicester world, ProPair, and once population is framed as a threat, the solutions offered by elite institutions almost always move in the same direction. More control, more surveillance, more restriction, and more authority concentrated in fewer hands. Whitney Webb then connects this history to the Rockefeller network, Maurice Strong, UNESCO, and Julian Huxley. This is the part of the story that makes transhumanism feel much less futuristic and much more historical. Because according to Webb, the same ideological current that once pushed eugenics did not disappear after World War II. It adapted. It changed language. It moved from race science into technology, genetics, and managed human evolution.
According to Klaus Schwab, was a man named Maurice Strong, who is credited as sort of the father of modern day climate change science, or rather, I would say climate change alarmism, and is a big promoter of, the same depopulation type of narrative. Among other things, but Maurice Strong's background is in oil. Again, the Rockefellers. This is a Rockefeller guy. And so the Rockefeller family historically is intimately involved in eugenics. They even funded the Nazi Eugenic Program.
That is a heavy claim, but its narrative function is clear. It forces the viewer to stop seeing elite environmentalism, global governance, and transhumanism as separate worlds. Webb is arguing they come from overlapping networks, with overlapping ideas about how humanity should be directed. And if those networks historically funded eugenics, then their modern interest in genetic engineering and human-machine integration deserves much more scrutiny than the media gives it.
Head of the British Eugenic Society, which is part of the same, group, more or less, Julian Huxley, he became Director General of UNESCO after World War II. And in laying out his vision for UNESCO, which again is part of the UN, Julian Huxley said, we have to make the unthinkable thinkable again, talking directly about eugenics.
Wow.
And about roughly a decade later, he Julian Huxley coins the term transhumanism, and basically says this is the new eugenics, that it's not about race science so much anymore. It's about using technology and genetic engineering to basically enact eugenics. And this includes like the merging of human and machine.
That is the core of the video. Transhumanism is often sold as a liberation project, but Webb is arguing it can also function as a continuation of eugenics through new tools. Instead of openly talking about racial hierarchy, the language becomes enhancement, optimization, longevity, augmentation, and technological evolution. But the question remains the same: who gets enhanced, who gets managed, and who decides the future of the human body? This is where Klaus Schwab's Fourth Industrial Revolution becomes central. Most people hear that phrase and think it refers to artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, and digital transformation. But Webb is focusing on the biological layer. The merging of digital and physical systems is not just about factories or phones. It is about the merging of digital systems with human biology itself.
So that goes back, to the 50s, to these people involved with eugenics. The Rockefeller Foundation is still involved with it today. This idea of transhumanism. So when you hear someone like Klaus Schwab, for example, talk about the fourth industrial revolution, that it's a merging, he says, of our digital and biological selves, this is essentially what they're talking about.
It is not just an economic transition, it is a biological transition, a future where bodies, identities, data, health systems, movement, labor, and financial access can all be integrated into digital infrastructure. And once the human body becomes part of the network, control becomes much more intimate than anything earlier systems could achieve.
Okay, so the way they like to sell this stuff is by being like, oh, it's a new era for humanity. Think of all the progress that can be done with these technologies. But if you look at these types of eugenicists and how they think, they're very classist. And as I mentioned earlier, we're moving towards neo-feudalism.
That is the divide viewers need to understand. The marketing is universal, but the benefits may not be. The elite version of transhumanism promises enhancement, longevity, intelligence upgrades, and technological power. But for ordinary people, the same infrastructure may mean surveillance, behavioral control, digital dependency, and a permanent loss of autonomy. Same system, different outcomes depending on class. Whitney Webb then makes the most disturbing part of the argument explicit. She says the elite vision is not a future where everyone becomes more free through technology. It is a future where technology reinforces hierarchy. The upgraded elite become almost untouchable, while the rest of society becomes more dependent, more managed, and less capable of resistance.
So that vision of being, basically gods on earth by being augmented by machines and stuff is for the elite, not for the rest of us. Someone I would encourage people to look at in terms of this vision would be H.G. Wells, who's the famous author, but he's also a famous eugenicist who was also part of the British Eugenics Society. And he basically put out this idea that, in not that long from when he was writing it in the early 20th century, that there was going to be two races of humanity. One were going to be, the elite, essentially, and the other would be squat-like dwarves who served the smart, good-looking humans who ate bugs.
That is the sentence that reframes the entire future being sold to the public. When billionaires talk about human enhancement, they are not necessarily describing a gift to humanity. They may be describing the next stage of class separation. One class becomes augmented, extended, medically optimized, and technologically protected. The other class becomes measured, monitored, and managed.
So this genetic engineering stuff and all of that, especially given, the neo-feudal outlook of all of this, it seems very likely that they're looking to use it that way and to make a class of humans who are subservient and can never be able to challenge their servitude. They won't even be able to physically or mentally conceive of it, right? That's ultimately where this is going. So
it just kind of makes me think, have you seen WALL-E?
WALL-E, years ago when it came out, I don't really remember it.
there's like this big spaceship and all the people are plugged in and like they're super fat and they're like drinking.
And they can't even walk anymore.
Yeah, they can't walk anymore. And their existence is just like this virtual reality up in space.
That is where transhumanism becomes political, because the question is not whether technology can improve life. Of course it can. The question is whether the institutions developing these systems are interested in human freedom or in human management. If genetic engineering, AI, digital identity, and biometric systems are controlled by the same elite networks already obsessed with risk, population, and centralized governance, then ordinary people should not assume the future is being built for them. The final layer Webb points toward is the metaverse. On the surface, it is sold as entertainment, connection, remote work, and immersive experience. But inside this broader framework, it looks very different. If the physical world becomes harder, poorer, more controlled, and more unstable, then a virtual world becomes a pressure valve, a place where people are invited to escape rather than resist.
The metaverse is really creepy. First of all, it's like a CIA military project originally, and Facebook itself is actually an outgrowth of DARPA, from the Pentagon anyway. And so there's a reason they're now like the metaverse company, because they're the ones that are, trying to carve out the biggest stake in it. Whether or not they do that, we will see.
That clip matters because it connects the metaverse back to military and intelligence origins. Webb is not treating it as a harmless consumer product. She is framing it as part of a longer pattern where surveillance technologies are privatized, rebranded, and then sold back to the public as convenience or entertainment. The same thing happened with social media. The same thing may happen with immersive digital worlds, and that is the final warning. If the same institutions building digital identity, biometric infrastructure, AI governance, and financial surveillance also build the virtual spaces people escape into, then the escape is not really an escape. It is another layer of the system, a softer cage, one people enter voluntarily because real life has been made too stressful, too expensive, or too unstable to fully inhabit. Three facts matter here. First, Whitney Webb traces transhumanism back to elite eugenics networks that did not disappear after World War II, but changed language and tools. Second, the fourth industrial revolution is not just about technology and the economy. It is about merging digital systems with human biology. And third, the future being sold as human enhancement may actually create a deeper class divide between an augmented elite and a managed population. So the real question is not whether genetic engineering, AI, and human-machine integration are coming. The real question is this: if the people designing the future have historically viewed humanity as something to manage, reduce, optimize, or redesign, what makes us think they are building this future for us?